Alita!
What are you doing?
It's set up. You gotta get out of there.
They're gonna kill you!
Which ones?
All of them!
Players, 10-second warning. 5 seconds. The new kid, Alita, takes possession right off the snap.
Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and we're going to take a look back at Alita Battle Angel and ask as to whether it's the best live action anime adaptation. And when looking at the movie, we go back to the release date of February the 14th, 2019, where it starred actress Rosie Salazar in a lead role alongside Christoph Waltz, Jennifer Connelly, Marhershala, and it was directed by Robert Rodriguez. The movie is an adaptation, of course, of the cult manga series Battle Angel Alita, which was created by Yukito Kishiro back in 1990, which ran all the way to 1995 and consisted of 9 volumes. The concept is set in a dystopian, distant future, very much post-apocalyptic setting, where the world is seemingly divided into 2 sections. We have the scrapyard cities, which are full of low resources and barren of commerce, full of humans and cybernetic beings. This is a contrast to the utopian, vast sky city of Salem, which is all pristine and evolutionary. All the citizens that exist within the scrap cities, whether it be scientists or bounty hunters, all aspire to collect enough tokens to gain entry into Salem. Anyone who tries to gain access illegally will be eliminated by the factory. And in this world, we see the introduction of scientist Dr. Ido amongst the scrapyards, looking for cybernetic parts and discovering half the body of a female cyborg which still has faint signs of sentience. Taking her back and rebuilding her, Ido names her Alita, and the series chronicles her journey into self-discovery and purpose, whilst taking on various antagonists. And the movie follows this outline very closely as we see the father-daughter relationship between Alita and Ido. We see Alita having flashbacks of an earlier life where she has multiple battles on the planet of Mars, discovering that she has the powers of the deadly fighting art known as the Pantzer Kunst. And as she comes to terms with her overall identity, she becomes aware of the gladiatorial multiple sports contests, which are there to entertain the masses, providing them with a certain amount of spectacle and bloodlust. She also meets a young boy named Hugo, who steals body parts from the cybernetic beings for tokens. He yearns desperately to get to Salem one day, and after falling in love with him, Alita helps him to get there by taking part in the multiple contests. Alita also comes across various enemies such as the hulking cyborg known as Garishka, the lethal bounty hunter known as Sapan, and the ruthless cyborg trafficker known as Vector, who exploits people and their desires to reach Salem. So when we look back at Alita Battle Angel, we ask the question as to whether it is the best live action adaptation of an anime or a manga in terms of source material. And I'll say that as at this point in 2023, that the answer is yes. Now in fairness, that isn't really saying much when you consider the likes of Dragon Ball Evolution, Ghost in the Shell, the Netflix series efforts of the likes of Death Note, Cowboy Bebop, and most recently One Piece. And whilst all of those adaptations had various degrees of success and failures in terms of adapting the source material, Alita Battle Angel achieved it most successfully. It manages to stay true to the main story and source whilst also being accessible enough to anybody who hasn't read the manga or watched the anime. With a huge budget, it translates the scrapyard and Salem environments very well, and there is a certain scale and scope to the film that's very much worthy of the material. Now when the movie project was announced, I was very skeptical of how good it would be, as I think a lot of manga and anime fans are as well when we see these live action attempts. Especially for me, as I'm a massive fan of the 1993 anime, which I think is absolutely incredible. And I really wasn't sure that this movie would hold up in comparison. But I do think director Robert Rodriguez did a really good job of combining the more cyberpunk science fiction elements with much more of the emotional human story, which I think is the real heart of the material, as it is very much driven by Alita's character and her quest for identification and the relationships that she has, in particular with Hugo and Ido. The movie's best element without question is actress Rosie Salazar, who was a great pick for the choice of Alita. She looks very similar to the character and she embodies the same beauty and sweet naivete and endearment. She really is the centre of the movie and carries it so well as what it should be. Now, for all of its merits, there are some issues with this movie, and I think one of the biggest is the overall pacing in terms of the storytelling. Now, it's well known that executive producer and revered director James Cameron acquired the rights to the IP of Alita way back in the early 2000s, and it was clear that he was far more interested in the elements concerning Mars, the motorball contests, and Zarnam, and all of these aspects would come in the later volumes of the manga. But you can't really go into those without covering the scrapyard origins first, and indeed Alita finding out who she is and building her relationships with other supporting characters. So the movie has tried to force all of these elements into the story, and the storytelling just feels a little bit forced and rushed. When drawing reference to the manga, overall the film tried to cover 4 main volumes into its overall story, and I just think it's too much for the film to take despite being over 2 hours long. We even get more foreshadowing near the end of the film into the later volumes of the manga, which concerned one of the main villains of the story in Destiny Nova, and also the ideas of cloning and Alita's evolution as a battle warrior. And these are the elements that I believe that James Cameron was far more interested in, but of course, because Alita is a far less popular manga than say the likes of Akira or Ghost in the Shell or Dragon Ball Z, they weren't really sure as to whether this would be successful enough to warrant a sequel, so indeed they've tried to cram all of it into this single film. And again, I think it proves to be to its detriment. Now, the other issue we talk about here is the amount of CGI, and I really think that in this film it was overused. We look at James Cameron's preference for artificial intelligence and alien organisms, which can be seen throughout his entire career, when we look at the likes of the Terminator, Aliens, Avatar or The Abyss. But I think he made the mistake of seeing Alita as his otherworldly being, this distinctive form from everybody else, and he unnecessarily visualised her using the motion capture technique that we normally see, especially from the Lord of the Rings films and also the Planet of the Apes movies. He really did emphasise much more on Alita's cyborg aesthetic, but this is a world that is full of cybernetic beings, and in terms of the source material, Alita doesn't really stand out from the other characters in terms of her physical appearance. But I think Cameron was too obsessed in how she was drawn in terms of the original artwork, particularly when we look at her facial features with the enlarged eyes. Now, this was an effect that thankfully, after reactions from the first trailer which was released. And when I look at the CGI and the effects, they don't quite merge fully with certain characters. This was an approach that I don't think was really needed, and I think using far more natural prosthetics for the humanoid characters would have served the movie far better. We again concentrate on the film aesthetic. A lot of the time you can clearly see the green screen backgrounds and environments. And when we are talking about a supposed dystopian scrapyard-like environment, the movie at times just looks a little bit too clean. Too much of a HD glossy sheen over the picture, where everything should be far more dirty and grime and gritty, again when you relate to both the manga and the anime. Had far more physical props been used for the backgrounds and environments and the characters, it would have given that film that real more raw and physical and visual feel as again what we saw with the anime. Especially when you look at Rosie Salazar and the fact that she already looked like Alita a lot without any motion capture that was required. We then talk about the supporting cast, who were all a very high caliber list of accomplished actors, but they're not quite fully utilised the way that they should have been, despite being very good picks for the characters that they play. Now, Christoph Waltz obviously has the most presence as the main supporting role as Ido, and I especially like the way that they added or expanded part of his character when we look at both him and Sharon's backstory, where they were married and they had a daughter who was named Alita, who was killed during the robbery of a cyborg. And this was a nice addition, but the film doesn't fully substantiate that emotional resonance enough, particularly when we look at Sharon's character, and it feels like a very much of a missed opportunity, especially when you have the stunning Jennifer Connelly playing the character. This goes the same also for Marhershala character in BATTE, who's very much limited in this role when he should actually be the primary antagonist. But it's not the imposing presence he really should have, and it's lessened more by the fact that near the end of the movie, we see that he's much more under the influence of Destiny Nova than rather being the master of his own devices. So whilst there's nothing wrong with the performances of the actors, it just seems a slight waste given high quality and the movie really could have merited with much more deeper characterization. So we go on to the movie's overall release, and it managed to gross over $405 million worldwide of a budget of around $185 million. Now, grossing over $400 million for a cinematic adaptation of a cult manga IP, normally this would mean great results. But then there was that large budget of $185 million. Again, this was a lot to do with the huge use of CGI and motion capture, which, as I stated before, was really overused. So when you take that level of budget and the general rule that a movie needs to make at least 2 times its overall budget before seeing any type of profit, then you can see why it's been so long for any sequel to be produced, despite the general positive reception that the movie receives both from audiences and critics. And the movie did gain praise a lot of the time at its release for being the best live action manga or anime adaptation. Now, for all of its merits, I would still highly recommend the 1993 anime, which was superior as it was far more streamlined and focused heavily on the first 2 volumes of the manga, really carrying greater emotional weight and characterization. It really is beautifully handled and is still a classic anime within the genre. But the movie adaptation itself is still overall a solid effort in handling this type of source material, which admittedly is never an easy job, but Alita Battle Angel still stands and remains at this stage the best live action adaptation of both a manga or anime. So there's my overall thoughts and feelings when looking back at Alita Battle Angel. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you have any other further topics or movies or television series that you'd like to see me cover within the channel, then also let me know within the comments and I will see if I can provide further commentary for you on those topics within the future. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves and I will see you very, very soon.